A wealthy commodities trader with the world at his feet.
My brother was a fun-loving guy.
He had anything he wanted. He had a lot of money, the Cadillacs and the Rolex watches.
Is viciously gunned down.
And they shot him again and again and again.
With his wife and kids in the home at the time of the attack.
It was a very traumatic event to the family, with people with guns threatening them.
You can't dismiss the fact it was a home invasion, but a lot of it didn't add up.
I had no idea at all how this could have happened.
Police chased down a number of suspects.
There was a complete falling out between them. Someone could get killed over a debt that they didn't pay.
A sudden disappearance leaves everyone on edge.
There was a trader. He disappeared off the face of the earth. It was suspected there was foul play involved.
One dead and one missing. Put a different spin on this type of investigation.
Every lead brings investigators to a dead end.
It's very frustrating to have a case that hits a brick wall.
Until 30 years later.
They were holding a very big secret inside.
When the shocking truth is revealed.
Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. That's not even human. That's the devil.
Just 30 minutes outside of Chicago lies Inverness, Illinois.
Inverness is one of the wealthiest suburbs of Chicago. It's a safe, beautiful neighborhood.
Some would call it very rich, very large homes, and very few crimes are ever committed in that area.
But on April 30th, 1979, at 3:20 p.m., police receive a distressing call from a 15-year-old girl named Becky Gamari.
Her words were, "There's been a robbery. My dad's been shot." She was bleeding from the chest. The police responded immediately.
As we entered through the front door, we were met by Becky Gamari. She was crying and pointing downstairs. I went downstairs and I saw a male who was leaning back in the sofa who appeared to have numerous gunshot wounds. There was a woman who was kneeling at the feet of the victim, crying almost in hysterics.
The woman identifies herself as Jackie Gamari. She says the victim is her husband, Carl, and that she and her 3 youngest children, Bobby, Carly, and Nick, were in the home when the intruders stormed in.
Those children must have been terrified and felt so helpless. It's horrifying.
The families were taken out to the squad cars so that they were secure and away from everyone.
Investigators set to work processing the crime scene, starting with the body.
I went over to the victim. I didn't find a pulse. There was a number of bullet holes in his chest with the blood basically draining down to his pants. I noticed a 9mm gun, and there were a number of 9mm casings that were strewn about the victim's feet. There was also a small .380 caliber handgun. It appeared that a 9mm was placed to make some type of a statement. This could be a staged killing. The victim, his legs were crossed at his ankles. It didn't appear to be a natural position. I went and took an inventory of what the rest of the house looked like. The bedrooms, the dresser drawers had been opened. A number of items appeared to be tossed on the floor. I could see that there were jewelry boxes that still had jewelry in them, which raises questions as to why they actually came to that residence.
Was this a legitimate robbery? Was this staged to cover something up? You can't dismiss the fact it was a home invasion, but a lot of it didn't add up. It did bring into question that they were there really to kill the victim.
We took a number of fingerprint lifts from the kitchen, the dining room, and the bedroom area.
One of the officers noticed there was no forced entry. Nobody kicked in the door or pried it.
As police continue working the scene, Carl's family receives the tragic news.
My sister called me and says, "You better get home, Carl was shot." So the whole neighborhood where the house was all cordoned off. We were told by the police he's in the house, he's dead, and they're investigating. So we were all like stunned.
When this happened, it was just a huge, huge shock, and we didn't know how to react. Disbelief and just can't be.
Carl Gamari was born in Elmwood Park, Illinois in 1944. He was the third of 4 children.
My brother Carl was a fun-loving guy. You know, he liked to go out and have fun, you know, go on dates with girls and go to parties and things like that.
When Carl was in high school, he met the love of his life.
When he started dating Jackie, he was like 18, and I think she was 17 at the time. He just knew that this was the one, and, you know, he wanted to get married, and he wanted to get married now.
Still teenagers, Carl and Jackie started a family right away.
Carl was excited to be a dad. They had 4 kids. Becky was the oldest, Bobby was the second oldest, Carly was the third daughter, and then Nick was the youngest. He was his son.
By 1977, Carl had the perfect family and the perfect job, working in finance at the Chicago Board of Trade.
Carl climbed up the ladder. He was energetic, and he loved it, and it fit his personality to a T.
He had anything he wanted. He had a lot of money. He came to Cadillacs, Rolex watches, and things like that. He started living a high life.
From the outside, Carl's life seemed picture perfect. But now, his violent death leaves his family shattered.
He's been shot, and I was shocked. You know, no one knew anything. What's going on? I had no idea at all how this could have happened.
Investigators start by interviewing Carl's family, who were also witnesses to the crime.
I took Jackie and the 2 girls out to the garage so I could get a general statement from them as to what occurred.
Jackie was crying and very upset. Becky was crying. Bobby was crying. This was the most traumatic thing children could go through. They said Carl went to work. Jackie was at home with Bobby, her 13-year-old daughter, 5-year-old Carly, and 2-year-old Nick. Around 12 or 12:30, Bobby is laying on the couch, and she's watching TV, and 2 men come in, and they have guns.
She said the 2 men were wearing stocking masks and dark clothing, and they had come in through the unlocked back door.
They point the guns at her, and they ask her, "Where's your mother?" So Bobby leads these men to the master bedroom, where Jackie is on the phone. They ask Jackie for her money, and she says, "I only have $20. And they said, "We're here for more than that." These men tie Bobby's hands behind her back, and then they tie up Jackie. They force them into the master bedroom closet with Carly, with baby Nick. Time is passing. Bobby said that she heard a man yelling, "No," who she thought was her father, and she heard 3 banging sounds, which she believed were gunshots.
Becky came home approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon from school. She walked in through the front door, called for her mom. All she heard was crying from the master bedroom. At that time, she found them banging on the closet door to be let out.
Once Becky opens up the closet doors, Bobby went directly down to the basement, and Bobby saw her father's bloody, bullet-ridden body laying on that couch. It is difficult to imagine how terrifying this must have been.
While the family lived through an extremely traumatic ordeal, police are hopeful that with their help, they can catch Carl's killers.
Jackie and Bobby said that the suspects had actually pulled up their masks, so they had their face exposed to them.
Jackie described the first suspect as a male white, mid to late 20s to 30s, tall, dark-haired, and also had a mustache. The second suspect was shorter than the first, slightly heavier, was a white male, but had a pale complexion and facial hair.
Bobby and Jackie were able to do composites of the faces they saw. I think there was a lot of hope somebody's going to recognize these individuals.
When we heard about the sketch, we thought that would be it. They'd be able to find him. I was hoping to get the information out as quickly as possible with the suspect's description, so that if someone was possibly stopped or seen within the general area, a patrol vehicle could have stopped them.
In Inverness, where crime is virtually non-existent, Police believe there is more to this case than meets the eye.
It appeared to be a staged crime. It could be someone who owed money to someone and being shot for that, a jealous boyfriend. It could be a number of different things. You can't close your mind to any possibility at that point in time.
Coming up, investigators uncover sordid secrets.
He might have had some associates who might have been involved with the mob. It definitely raised a red flag.
The killers evade detectives until an unexpected witness steps forward.
You told me how it was going to be done, how they were going to kill Carl.
To reveal a dark and twisted plot no one predicted.
As soon as they knew how Carl was going to be murdered, and that's exactly what happened to him.
That was the missing key.
The murder of commodities trader and father of four, Carl Gamari. His wife and young family were at home at the time of the terrifying attack.
Jackie and the two girls were mostly in shock. They were completely overwhelmed by what was happening.
Jackie and Bobby saw the gunman. Armed with their description, officers go door to door looking for witnesses.
One of the neighbors saw two men coming from the Gamaris through her yard, and she thought one of them was carrying like a jewel bag. After that neighbor pointed out where she saw the two men walking through her yard, the detectives went back and followed that path. They had found a cigarette butt that still had ash on it by her driveway.
That cigarette butt was collected by the State Police Crime Lab, but in 1979 there was no DNA, so there really wasn't much of the evidence that could be collected off of that cigarette butt.
More witnesses come forward to help police trace the suspect's movements.
There was a woman who was in her car around the time that this incident took place. She stated that she saw a beater-type gray car parked on the side of the street. When she returned approximately 3 o'clock or so, she said that she saw the vehicle oncoming towards her. She said that the driver was a white male. The second passenger in the front was a white male, but he was trying to slump down in the seat. In her words, she thought he was trying to hide himself.
The neighbor who saw that vehicle coming towards her with the two men was also able to do a composite.
It's similar to the one Jackie and Bobby gave police.
Composites are very, very useful. You can put them in the newspaper, you can get them on the news, you can get them out there for people, other agencies, to see if anybody could identify them as possible suspects. So after the canvass was conducted, they then did a sweep of the area between the victim's house and where this car was observed to see if they could find any evidence. They also discovered tire impressions and some footwear impressions that were in the mud there where the car had been parked.
Back at the crime scene, investigators get an unexpected visitor.
I noticed someone approached me and he pulled out his credentials as being a Chicago police officer and told his name was Sam Greco. Sam said that he was a family friend. The girls knew Sam. They felt comfortable around him.
He said that he had been called by the daughter, that something had happened, so he was coming out to see what assistance he could lend.
On the day of the murder, Becky made 2 phone calls. She did call 911. Her next call was to Sam, to tell him what had taken place.
Sam originally arrived up the scene about an hour after the initial call. He had advised him that he had been on the phone with Jackie. This was about 12:30 in the afternoon, and that during their conversation, she said somebody was there, and he heard some voices in the background, and then the call was disconnected. So he had offered to give them his phone records so they could try to establish a timeline of when that occurred.
Based on the time of the phone call, police believe the gunman arrived at 12:30 p.m. and left by 3 that afternoon. They spent over 2 hours in the home, a detail that puzzles the investigators.
They spent so much time in the house, which is not normal. Home invaders usually come in, take care of business, and leave. They don't sit around. Second, the amount of items that were left behind didn't indicate that this was a straight-up home invasion.
My question was whether or not they knew that Carl Gamari was coming home at that point in time, and why did they kill him?
Who did it and why? And why my brother? What did he do that he deserved to have his life snuffed away and taken away? We had no idea who it could be.
In their search for answers, detectives turn back to Carl's wife, Jackie.
Anytime you're investigating a murder within a family, you have to look at the surviving spouse. It was clear that Jackie hadn't been the one to shoot Carl. 2 armed invaders came into their house and locked him in the closet. It was very traumatic to the kids and to Jackie. To have all of a sudden their peaceful day broken down with people with guns and then threatening them and not letting them move around the house, not knowing what was going to happen next.
They were absolutely terrified. Even after the suspects had left, it was difficult to get them to concentrate on making a statement. Jackie was crying, upset.
When detectives ask Jackie about her relationship with Carl, she tells them she loved him and that he was her high school sweetheart. But what she reveals about her marriage surprises investigators.
Carl and Jackie had a rather unorthodox situation at times. Over the years, they both had affairs, and they would bring their lovers home.
When you get information like that, that's an important thing to follow up on and look further to see if that has anything to do with what occurred here.
Had the couple's infidelities led to Carl's murder?
You have to look at that as a possibility.
It definitely raised a red flag.
It was definitely shocking.
Getting the cold-blooded murder of Carl Gamari, have learned he and his wife, Jackie, had both been unfaithful.
That's a big red flag and needs to be looked at very thoroughly.
Jackie tells police they had recently agreed to work on their marriage.
They seemed to be getting better as you got into 1979. They were trying to work it out.
They went on a romantic vacation. They were making a plan to do another big trip to Africa. They were buying a new house, and they would tell friends that, yeah, things are getting back together for us. We're going to make an effort to make this work, especially because of the kids.
A year before the murder, the couple had even decided to renew their vows.
We as a family thought, wow, this is nice. This is really nice to see, that they wanted to get together and they have us there witness the renewing of their vows.
They were like 2 lovebirds. He was gleaming from ear to ear, and so was Jackie, and they seemed like a wonderful couple.
While Jackie was also a victim in this crime, detectives still need to know if she'd have anything to gain financially from Carl's death.
It was learned that there was only about a $30,000 life insurance policy. Carl had never signed a will, which ties it up in court, and it could be 7 years before you see any of the financial gain from this. And so this kind of cleared Jackie of being in the spotlight of the investigation.
Investigators consider whether Carl and Jackie's renewed marriage could have driven one of their former lovers to murder. When they ask Jackie who she had an affair with, her answer is surprising.
Jackie and Sam Greco had an affair.
She said that she had dated Sam for quite some time, but that she had broken off the relationship with Sam to recommit to her marriage with Carl.
Jackie had said when she became pregnant with Nick, she stopped seeing Sam.
Detectives need to know, was Sam a jealous ex? Could he have killed Carl to have Jackie to himself?
Sam was interviewed once on the phone and then again in person. He had met Jackie at a wedding, and he was doing some private investigative work, and Jackie had hired him to follow Carl to see if he was having an affair. There was an indication from Sam's investigation that Carl was having an affair.
And that ultimately led to them initiating a relationship.
Sam also told the investigators that he and Jackie had been lovers, but they were now just friends.
Sam denied any involvement with this case.
They took his phone records, fingerprinted them, and they interviewed individuals associated with Sam.
He was considered a hero within the Chicago Police Department. The police back then still investigated him as much as they could.
The investigators ruled him out as not being involved in this.
With Sam eliminated from the investigation, detectives next look at the woman with whom Carl had been having an affair.
Gail Kayak was someone whom Carl had actually hired and worked with.
When Gail was interviewed, her description was it was kind of two adults having some fun together. It was nothing serious. She knew it was going nowhere. She knew Carl was married.
Gail tells investigators she and Carl broke things off about a year ago and that there wasn't any animosity between them.
She ended up, after the relationship was over between her and Carl, had a boyfriend, got pregnant. Given the affair had been over for a year, it just made really no sense that she would be involved in this in any way.
Just when detectives think they've hit another dead end, Gail gives them a stunning new lead. She says they need to speak to Carl's former friend and colleague, Ned Kaiser.
Ned Kaiser was one of the closer people to Carl at the Board of Trade. They had worked together there for a while. They socialized.
Gail claims Ned not only knew about her affair with Carl, but told Jackie about it.
Carl and Ned were friends. Carl would use his apartment to be with his girlfriend. Ned ultimately got upset with Carl, told Jackie that Carl was using his place to be with his girlfriend. Once Carl found out that Ned was the one who told Jackie about Gail, that soured the relationship.
Gail also tells police Ned had a dark reputation.
She had rumored that he had ties to organized crime. Whenever you're dealing with people with money and investment and all, there's always a possibility that someone could get killed over a debt that they didn't pay.
Had Carl and Ned fallen out over money? Had Ned put out a hit on his former friend?
You always look at the big picture. Business dealings with Ned, him betraying Carl to Jackie about using his place, Ned having some possible mob connections. I think you got to look at everything. You have to see what's there. Where does that lead you? Is this a person who has a reason to kill Carl?
They're following a tip that the murder of successful trader Carl Gamari may have been a targeted hit, one organized by his former friend and coworker, Ned Kaiser.
Ned Kaiser might have been, quote-unquote, involved with the mob.
During the 1970s, Chicago was very much involved with the criminal network of the mob, and a number of people wound up dead every year.
Organized crime had a hand in gambling. From information obtained from co-workers and people that knew Carl, he gambled at the Board of Trade, he would gamble outside. Well, if individuals are gambling like that, then chances are they would cross paths with organized crime people.
5 days after the homicide, Ned is brought in for an interview. Police ask about his friendship and working relationship with Carl.
The relationship with Ned and Kaiser and Carl and the family was an extensive, involved one. They had known each other for approximately 9 years, and at one point, when Ned was going through a divorce, they actually let him move into their house.
Ned says that's why he had a hard time keeping Carl's affair secret.
Ned had told investigators that the reason he came forward to Jackie was because he was friends with both of them, and he just felt that Jackie was being mistreated by the way Carl was acting and needed to correct it.
Detectives ask Ned if Carl was indebted to him or if they had any conflict about money.
Ned denied ever having any kind of a fight with Carl. Ned was asked if he had any involvement, if he knew anything about Carl's murder, and he denied having any direct knowledge. There was nothing that anyone could dig up that would say Ned was responsible for Carl's death.
The investigators took a very hard look at him to see if there was any way that he could have committed this crime. And They were able to rule him out. There was no evidence connecting him to the murder of Carl Gamari.
Investigators are forced to let Ned go.
The police talked to everyone that they possibly could. If they talked to one person and that person mentioned other people, they went and talked to those people as well. And then it gets to a point where there's just no other leads to pursue at that time. So the police are essentially waiting for new information.
Authorities once again turn to the public in an attempt to find the men who killed Carl and terrorized his family.
Their composites are very critical in our ongoing investigation in identifying the shooters.
I remember cutting out all the headlines and all that. Boy, something's going to be recognized with the sketch and something's going to happen with this and come about from it. But days would go on and nothing.
When the sketches were released, there wasn't a lot of information that came in. Nothing substantial at all.
Detectives hope that the autopsy report will provide a crucial new lead.
Carl had been shot 6 times. The fatal wound had penetrated his chest into his heart and severed the aorta. When you have multiple shots like that from 2 different guns, it's apparent that their intent was to kill him.
And they shot him again and again and again and again, a total of 6 times.
Since the medical examiner didn't find any defense wounds on Carl, there is no physical evidence on his body to link to the perpetrators. Frustration grows when detectives get the report on the fingerprints found at the crime scene.
There were no known matches of any of those latent fingerprints. They had no real suspects.
Didn't seem like anybody was going to be arrested for this.
With the killer still on the loose, the town of Inverness is on edge, while Carl's family lives in fear.
A couple of days after the original murder, someone had put a threatening note in the mailbox. Jackie then went to the police and said she was being threatened, and that was her concern for her safety.
When I found that out, I was very disturbed. I was concerned about Jackie and the kids. Somebody wanted my brother killed.
2 weeks after the murder, police make a disturbing discovery.
It came to the attention of the initial investigators that there was a trader, worked at the Chicago Board of Trade, had just disappeared. It was suspected there was foul play involved.
Detectives learn his name is Artie Jones, and he's one of Carl's business associates.
Art Jones knew Carl. There may have been some money involved between the 2 of them.
No one knew what happened to him. He left for work, drove into the city, and was never heard from again.
Could the 2 cases be connected?
Now put a new light, a new focus with 2 traders in close proximity, 1 dead and 1 missing, put a different spin on this type of investigation.
At that point in time, when we heard the news and it was all over the papers, that we thought, wow, now that we know there's something going on at the Board of Trade.
When you had Carl, who was killed and being part of Board of Trade, and then you have Artie, who disappears after going to work at the Board of Trade, those don't happen often.
And when Artie Jones happened, that was very concerning. It was, we wanted to find out, okay, who's after Artie and who's after Carl, if there was somebody, in fact, after.
Weeks after Carl Gamari's murder, his coworker, Artie Jones, has vanished. Detectives are hunting for a potential connection between the 2 cases.
Through the Highland Park investigation of Artie, they interviewed his wife, and she said that since the murder of Carl, he had become very edgy. He was very secretive about going out to meet some people for business at that time and then never coming back. It just heightened that concern she had about the 2 being related.
There was just no trace of him. They ran credit checks, they did phone records. They had absolutely nothing of where this individual may have gone or why he disappeared.
They located his vehicle near O'Hare Airport.
No reason why it was there, no rhyme. Couldn't put him on an airplane. There was just nothing. He was gone.
That investigation was rather lengthy, and they never did locate him. And eventually, his wife had him declared dead. It's very frustrating to have a case that hits a brick wall.
Carl's family continues to push for answers.
I was persistent. I would call. I wanted to hear from the horse's mouth, from the detectives. What's going on? What's the next step? What are you looking at? Months and months and months turned into a year turned into 2 years. Then you kind of like lost faith a little bit.
Carl's loved ones try to cope with the terrible realization that his killers may never be found.
The investigation wasn't turning up anything. They broadcasted and showed those pictures of the two men for a long time. No one knew anything. The case is considered a cold case.
30 years later, the case is reopened.
Detectives Mike Kirby and Bill Stutzman took over that investigation, gave it new life. These were people who had investigated, hundreds of violent crimes in their careers.
I had spent 9.5 years on a homicide task force. So this was my first actual cold case.
We were told to look at this case from 30 years ago. Right away, you're like, 30 years? Who's even going to be alive from back then that we could talk to? But when we sat down and we compiled our plan of action, people we wanted to talk to, we became extremely excited about the possibility of this being solved.
As the new detectives start digging into the cold case, they are confronted with a daunting problem.
Barrington Police Department had 2 floods in their basement where their evidence was kept. These floods basically contaminated any of the evidence, ruling it unusable. Any DNA we might have was gone.
That's a major blow in an investigation. Most cold cases nowadays are solved through forensic evidence. We had none of that.
Then, in 2011, a stunning turn of events reignites the investigation.
We get a phone call. It was shocking to us.
Artie Jones had been located, living under an assumed name in Las Vegas, part of a fraud investigation by the federal government, and located him. We were extremely shocked that he was alive.
Investigators fly to Nevada to interview Artie Jones about Carl's murder.
Well, the first thing we wanted to know was what relationship did Artie Jones have at all with Carl? Did they have any kind of business transaction? He claimed he didn't even know him. So then we focused on why did he disappear then. When we talked to Mr. Jones, he said that he was having financial problems. He didn't like his job, he didn't like his life, he was unhappy with his marriage, so he just faked his disappearance. And that became very clear that he had staged all this by planning the car by the airport. The two had no connection. The Gamari murder and his disappearance were not related.
With the Artie Jones mystery solved, detectives are again left with no leads.
What we decided to do was to work this like it was a fresh case and just start from the beginning with no preconceived notions, no thoughts on where we were going to go with it.
Bill Stutzman and Mike Kirby re-interviewed everyone who had been interviewed that they could find back in 1979 and 80, and one of the people they interviewed was Jackie's sister, Tootsie. When police interviewed Tootsie the night of Carl's murder, she told them on the morning of April 30th, Jackie called Tootsie and told her to come over that day. And if Tootsie had come that day, I don't know if she would have been another victim.
Detectives bring Jackie's sister, Tootsie, in for an interview. As they question her, she makes a jaw-dropping revelation.
She said, I've been ridden with guilt throughout the years. I've seen what it did to the kids, what it did to his family. I can only be truthful about this. I can only tell you what was told to me.
Tootsie was having ulcers after the murder of Carl. She was holding a very big secret inside.
It troubled her to keep this secret for so long. She just realized, I believe, that it was the right thing to do, and that's what she always wanted to do.
And she proceeded to tell us about 2 months prior to the murder that Jackie had said, I don't love Carl anymore. I don't want to be with him. This is the time when Jackie and Carl were getting back together.
Jackie had supposedly stopped the affair with Sam Greco.
Based on what we learned, that was not the truth. Her affair still continued.
It was very shocking. It gives you a different light view of Jackie, yes, as a person and the type of individual she is.
What Tootsie says next leaves investigators stunned.
Jackie had told her of a plan that she had with Sam.
Jackie said to Tootsie, "We've found a way to get rid of Carl. We're going to make it look like a home invasion. Some men are going to come in, they're going to tie me up, and they're going to wait for Carl to come home and kill him."
Tootsie couldn't believe what her sister was saying to her, and they just kind of ended the conversation with Tootsie saying, "Jackie, you don't have to do that. Divorce him. Just divorce him." And Jackie would reply, "If I divorce him, then I don't get all the money."
Jackie had told her how Carl was going to be murdered, and that's exactly what happened to him.
It seemed almost mind-blowing to think that Jackie could be involved in such a crime as to expose her daughters and her infant to their father getting killed in the home.
Investigators tell Tootsie they'll need more than just her word to lay charges.
They decided to ask her if she would be willing to record conversations with her sister Jackie. At first, Tootsie said no, she didn't want to do it. She didn't want to hurt Jackie.
We had emphasized with her that, no, we're not saying Jackie physically killed Carl, but she was part of a plan in which Carl was killed. And we had said, we're asking you to put an open-ended statement to her and see how she responds. She agreed to do it.
That was the missing key to make this case go forward.
After the cold-blooded killing of father of four, Carl Gamari, police learn his wife Jackie plotted his murder with her former lover, Sam Greco. But investigators need hard evidence to arrest her. They convince Jackie's sister, Tootsie, to record a conversation.
Hi, Jackie.
How you doing?
I'm not doing good, honey. The police have been here about Carl, and they've been asking me a lot of questions. They're saying I might have to go in front of the grand jury. I don't know if you remember what you told me.
I do. Are you going to do that, though, to me?
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to.
Oh, my God. So just tell him that I wish he was dead. Don't tell him I said that, please.
They already know, Jackie. You told me how it was going to be done, how they were going to break in and tie you up and put you in the closet and then kill Carl. You
gotta help me, Tootsie. I can't go to jail. You gotta help me.
I can't lie. I can't lie.
Did you just tell them you're all confused and don't remember?
But they know I remember. They know I do.
Those recorded conversations are devastating.
Jackie saying, "Can you lie for me? Can't you say you forget?" There was truth to what Tootsie was saying. And that's why Jackie wanted to lie for her. That was very damaging evidence.
Those recordings were all that were needed to have an arrest warrant issued.
Police bring Jackie down to the station.
We did not tell her she was under arrest, but she was not going anywhere. We had the arrest warrant. During the course of the interview, not only did we tell her, we talked to Tootsie, who told us about their conversation. We played portions for Jackie.
And I don't do that stuff, and that's enough to put me away. Okay. What am I supposed to say when they ask me why I said that to you? What am I supposed to say?
That I can't answer. I don't know. Maybe you didn't mean to tell me, but you did.
What should I do?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
You're my sister, but you're a witness against me. Your testimony is enough to put me away. I'm going to go to jail.
Confronted by her own words, Jackie tries to put the blame on her former lover, Sam.
Because she wanted to be able to say, yes, okay, early on, I said, let's do this. But then I backed out. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So therefore, I'm not guilty of Carl's murder.
There are so many things Jackie did that tells you what kind of a person she is. She wanted to be with Sam. She didn't want to be with Carl.
After the murder, Sam and Jackie married a few months later.
Several years later, Sam and Jackie were divorced. We continued a full-force investigation into Sam Greco's involvement, as also pursuing the two shooters. And before we could gain enough evidence to charge him, he passed away from his medical conditions.
On March 27th, 2013, Jackie alone is charged with the first-degree murder of her husband, Carl Gamari.
Jackie was the true monster. Without Jackie, this crime never would have happened.
In 2016, a jury finds Jackie guilty, but the verdict is overturned on appeal. Prosecutors offer Jackie a deal. She pleads guilty to murder and is sentenced to 22 years in prison.
Justice finally was served. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it.
She was a true sociopath. And not just for taking Carl's life, but because of what she did to her children. She chose to have her children be victims of this traumatic event just for her own selfish needs to get rid of her husband.
A woman that involves her own children in a scheme, in a plan, in a plot to have their father murdered, her husband murdered. I don't know, if you ask me, that's not even human. That's the devil.
4 decades after the murder, police are still searching for the gunman.
This remains an open and active investigation. It's never going to stop. If there's any new information, the police are going to follow up on it. No matter how long those shooters live and how much time passes, they can never stop looking over their shoulder.
My brother was a good guy. He was very determined to succeed in anything he did. To see how he would have been.
In Hollywood, a dead man isn't who he appears to be, and someone just walked away with $1 million insurance benefit. Now, forensics must prove that murder was part of the package. A police officer kills his wife in a freak car accident, but investigators believe he may have been driven to homicide. A simple farmer stands accused of murdering his brother, and a town rallies to his defense. So does forensic science. They look death in the face every day of their lives. From fragments of bone, drops of blood, and slivers of tissue, they can piece together the shattered circumstances that bring the deceased to their labs. Every body has a story to tell, and each is a page in the coroner's casebook. When someone dies, their work begins. Coroners, medical examiners, and criminalists know that every kind of death leaves its subtle mark. And they know murder when they see it. Early in the morning of April 16, 1988, the Glendale, California 911 dispatcher received a call about a man in cardiac arrest. The call was placed by Dr. Richard Boggs, a respected neurologist. When paramedics arrived at his office, he explained that the man was one of his patients named Gene Hansen, who had a history of heart trouble. The victim had credit cards in Hansen's name. Before he called 911, Dr. Boggs said he'd done all he could to revive his patient, but nothing worked. Gene Hansen was declared dead at the scene. At the LA County Coroner's Office, the body was given a routine autopsy. The office sees 200 bodies each day, and this one was just another face in the crowd. Seeing no immediate cause of death except for a few marks on the heart, the coroner deferred to the diagnosis of the victim's personal physician, Dr. Boggs. Hansen's cause of death was listed as heart failure due to a dangerous heart condition. The body was released to the hands of John Hawkins, Hansen's companion and his partner in their successful sportswear business. He flew to California from Ohio to claim the remains. He had them cremated in respect for Hansen's last request. Hawkins, as his partner's sole beneficiary, then received the first million of Hansen's $1.5 million life insurance policy. Usually, that would be the end of the story. But this story was just getting started. 5 months after the death, an insurance agent was closing Hansen's file when she noticed something strange. The face on Hansen's autopsy photo didn't resemble the photo supplied by the Department of Motor Vehicles. To double check, she requested that the thumbprint on file at the DMV be compared with the one from the autopsy. No doubt about it. These were two different men. And that raised two vital questions. Where was the real Hansen, and who was the dead man? The agent had uncovered something a lot more serious than insurance fraud. Though they're situated next to each other, the difference between Glendale, California and North Hollywood is like night and day. But this is where Glendale police went to solve the mystery of the dead man who wasn't Gene Hansen. Police determined from fingerprints and missing persons reports that the man was really a bookkeeper named Ellis Green. He was last seen leaving a bar in North Hollywood on April 15th. The next day, he was declared dead under an assumed name in Dr. Boggs's office. Sergeant John Perkins of the Glendale Police tried to sort out what happened.
A photograph of Ellis Green's body that was depicted in the doctor's office was taken to his elderly aunt, and that photo was shown to her. She identified that as being Ellis Green, her nephew. Now we knew we had the real body, the real name, but we still didn't have an exact or approximate cause of death.
Demonstrating how Green died was only half the task before him. Investigators also had to prove that the real Gene Hansen was still alive. By now, months had passed. If Hansen were alive, he had an enormous head start to find a hiding place. John Hawkins, his partner in this elaborate insurance scam, had also vanished, along with $1 million of insurance money.
Michael Button, John Perkins.
Police concentrated on the last person to see the victim alive, Dr. Boggs.
Hello, officers. I'm Dr. Boggs. What can I do for you?
Police paid a visit to him to find out about the man who died in his office. Boggs told them that he'd been a patient for years. Boggs knew him only as Melvin Eugene Hansen, or Gene. He had no reason to suspect it was an assumed name. Faced with a search warrant, he handed over his patient's files. Sergeant Perkins examined them. It was possible that Dr. Boggs was telling the truth. Gene Hansen's record showed that he'd been repeatedly warned about his condition, but refused to follow doctor's orders. But it was also possible that Dr. Boggs was in on this elaborate insurance scam, and the records themselves were doctored. Perkins pulled 3 EKG strips, dated several months apart. He wondered if they truly demonstrated the life-threatening heart condition that supposedly killed Green. He asked a cardiologist to analyze the EKGs. The heart specialist told him that they indicated a mild, common condition that wasn't fatal. Perkins was more suspicious than ever that Dr. Boggs had intentionally faked the records. But he couldn't prove it. Then he found the answer was right on the EKG strips, simple enough for even a layman to understand.
Late one night, I was sitting at my desk and I'm looking at these EKG strips and I'm going through them and I'm looking at them and suddenly it became very obvious. One was completely clean. One had a red dye halfway down the length of the EKG strip, and the other one had a complete dye from the entire length of the EKG strip. And you suddenly think, wait a minute, these are all connected. So I put them up on the desk and put them end to end, and sure enough, the fractures matched perfectly.
The red markings signaling the end of the roll formed one continuous darkening line across two of the three strips, allowing Perkins to put them into sequential order. But when he did so, the dates that Boggs wrote on the back of the strips were out of order and months apart.
These were fabricated EKG strips.
While Perkins was making his discovery, the case was progressing on a different front.
You want to check this area in here, and I'll go in the kitchen and check. Okay.
Police were following the trail of Ellis Green's credit card purchases. The dead man's cards were still active and still in use. Investigators weren't sure who was using them, but they hoped it was the real Gene Hansen. They tracked the card to a bungalow on Key West, Florida. The rental agent confirmed that the tenant was a man named Ellis Green. He had moved out weeks earlier, and the apartment hadn't been rented since. Detectives looked for any clues that could reveal the identity of the former occupant. On a glass in a cabinet, they found one, a fingerprint. It matched Gene Hansen's. Now they had proof that he was alive.
Sir, could you ever see
Then, in January 1989, 9 months after his reported death, Gene Hansen, traveling under another assumed name, was stopped at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport returning from Mexico. He'd been acting eccentrically enough for customs agents to pull him over and inspect his suitcases. They found $14,000 in cash that he failed to declare, thereby breaking the law. They also found the IDs for 13 people. Among them was Ellis Green's, the dead man in Dr. Boggs' office. Here was proof that he'd switched identities with the victim and pocketed some of his own death benefits. He was arrested. With Gene Hansen captured and the incriminating EKG strips, police had enough to arrest Boggs as well. They knew they had him for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. In fact, they uncovered evidence that he and Hansen had pulled off some fraudulent claims in the past. The two of them, along with John Hawkins, staged car accidents for the insurance money. Dr. Boggs was the physician who signed off on their medical claims. But was there enough evidence to prove that Boggs actually murdered Ellis Green as part of the conspiracy? Without a body, they didn't seem to have much of a case. Boggs claimed that they originally hoped to steal a body from the morgue, but that proved impossible. Then, by gruesome coincidence, the conspirators said they happened upon Ellis Green's body shortly after he died. Despite how unlikely the story sounded, Boggs challenged the prosecution to prove he was lying. Glendale Police Sergeant John Perkins had to somehow turn an elaborate insurance scam into a case of homicide. Gene Hansen, the man who faked his own death, and Richard Boggs, the accommodating physician, were already in custody. Perkins was eager to put all the pieces together and wrap it up, but there was still no sign of John Hawkins, the beneficiary who fled with the $1 million insurance payout. And still, investigators were short on evidence to prove what they strongly suspected, that Dr. Boggs murdered Ellis Green to pass him off as Gene Hansen.
We really needed somebody who could look at the entire pieces of evidence that we had, that being the autopsy report, some of the tissues. There was a stomach content that was collected at the time of autopsy, and examine those from an independent view, to look at the crime scene photos, to give us some indication as to this person did not die of natural causes. And that's when we brought in Dr. Michael Bodden.
Michael Bodden is the executive director of the New York State Police Forensic Science Unit. He's also an expert on the nuances that death leaves on the body. He has worked on the congressional committees that investigated the deaths of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, Jr. In the case of Ellis Green, Bodden had slides of his heart, lung, and liver tissue, as well as photographs of the victim that were taken shortly after death. From this evidence, Bodden could determine two facts with confidence. One, Green did not have a fatal heart condition, and two, his skin, which showed no other marks, was blue at the time of death, suggesting lack of oxygen. From these two facts, Bodden reached a single conclusion: Green was suffocated. Except for the telltale blue color, in the absence of a struggle, suffocation leaves no marks. Its diagnosis comes from eliminating all other possible causes of death. It's a diagnosis of exclusion.
A bullet wound, we don't need a diagnosis of exclusion because we find a hole in the body. A stab wound or a blow from a baseball bat all leave marks on the body that we can see at autopsy. But if something is put over the nose and mouth, causing a person to die because he or she can't breathe, and then that object is removed, a hand or a pillow, at the autopsy there's no specific finding that's going to say that he was suffocated.
The evidence was enough to convince a jury that the three men had planned the crime together, and that Dr. Boggs, the healer, was Dr. Boggs, a killer.
These three individuals were not strangers to crime. They had hooked up probably 4 years before this particular murder, and they had worked out different ways of committing insurance fraud. And the plan that they evolved was somebody had to die. That person, they agreed, was to be Gene Hansen. And the only way that they could pull this thing off was with a doctor, and that doctor was Dr. Boggs.
Police believe that Boggs picked Ellis Green up at a bar, the last place he had been seen. He bought him some drinks to make him more compliant. The victim's blood alcohol content was well above the legal limit.
Did you make it? Think so? Think so?
Then, Boggs lured him to his office. Just in case the victim was still sober enough to fight back, Boggs may have incapacitated him with a stun gun. Then the victim was smothered without putting up a fight. Perkins believes that the forensic pathologist's determination of murder made this case winnable.
Dr. Bodden's testimony in this particular case, I feel, was that last inning, you're down by 2 and bases are loaded, and Dr. Bodden came in and basically hit a home run for us.
In 1990, Richard Boggs was found guilty of first-degree murder and fraud. He was sentenced to life without possibility of parole. It took 3 years and a worldwide manhunt before police caught up with John Hawkins on the island of Sardinia. In 1995, both he and Melvin Eugene Hansen were convicted of fraud, grand theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. Hansen was given life without parole. Hawkins received 25 years to life. The work of the medical examiner undermined the murderous conspiracy of Gene Hansen and his cohorts. But whether a crime is ingenious or devilishly simple, the forensics required to solve it is equally complex. On the rainy night of November 27, 1992, just after 9:30 p.m., a passing motorist reported what looked like an accident on Hawaii's Volcano Highway. Police arrived to find a van facing the wrong way, apparently after spinning. The responding officer recognized the owner of the van to be Ken Matheson, a sergeant on the police force. Ken was badly shaken up. His wife, Yvonne, fared much worse. Ken had tended to her in the back of the van until help arrived. She had lost a lot of blood. By strange coincidence, Yvonne Matheson was a nurse who helped deliver the responding officer's first child weeks before. Paramedics moved her into the ambulance to rush her to the hospital at Hilo. The hospital where she worked became the place where she died. When Ken Matheson's fellow officers heard about the incident on the police radio, they went to see him at the hospital. Matheson told one of his colleagues that his wife's death was a terrible accident. She was driving the van when they started to fight. Things escalated. Enraged beyond reason, Yvonne jumped out of the open window of the moving van. Ken said he slid over to steer the vehicle, then backed up to look for his wife. That's when he ran over her. Yvonne and Ken Matheson had once been divorced, but then decided to give their marriage a second chance. It seemed to be working this time, give or take the usual rough spots. Then, this tragedy destroyed it all. According to Hilo police, any accident that results in death is considered negligent homicide. For this misdemeanor, Matheson could expect a maximum fine of $1,000 and a year in jail. At the least, he'd be fined $100 or be sentenced to 100 hours of community service.
Don't worry.
In any case, he'd be able to keep his badge. He didn't protest the charges. As in any sudden death, a complete investigation would have to be conducted. It was a formality. The death of Yvonne Matheson was unfortunate and tragic, but police had no reason to doubt Ken's story. While the investigation was underway, Matheson stayed on active duty with the police force. But after inspecting the scene of the accident, Hawaii County Police noticed some minor inconsistencies between the roadside evidence and Matheson's story. At first, they seemed hardly worth mentioning. Each year, tourists flock to Hawaii to escape the cares of their daily lives. The sun, the surf, and the primal fiery beauty of the volcanoes exert their cleansing influence. For Hawaii's inhabitants, life in paradise goes on just like anywhere else. Crimes are committed, accidents happen, and investigators are charged with determining which is which. In Hilo, traffic investigators inspected the area where the wife of Sergeant Ken Matheson lost her life. They found relatively little blood on the highway compared to what was found in the van. Though it was a little peculiar, they wrote it off to the rain and the fact that Ken Matheson had rushed his dying wife into the van after he struck her. At the police impoundment lot, the van had its own story to tell. It was routine procedure for a vehicle involved in a fatal accident to undergo a mechanical inspection. It negates any future defense claims of faulty equipment. Police also had to be sure the van was safe to drive before they could release it to Matheson. Because of the nature of this accident, the undercarriage was thoroughly inspected. Hawaii County Police traffic investigator Martin Elazar was surprised by the relative lack of damage he found there. However, when he was done inspecting the outside, the interior of the van caught his interest.
I peered inside from the outside and I could see blood stains. Blood stains on the driver's side window, blood stains on the plastic cover to the panel area fronting the steering wheel. Blood stains up above there. There's a heavy concentration of blood and hair on that bolt.
There was no reason for blood to be in the driver's portion of the vehicle. Elazar needed a closer look, but to search inside the van required a warrant. He asked Deputy Attorney General Kurt Spohn to request one. The warrant came through in the nick of time. 3 months had passed since the incident. According to Spohn, their main piece of evidence almost slipped through their fingers.
You do a mechanical inspection, and once all the mechanical inspections and the search warrants are finished, you return the van to the owner. And in this case, the van was authorized to be returned to the owner.
Fortunately, Matheson hadn't picked it up yet. The van was secure. The release authorization was canceled. A search warrant for the van's interior was issued. Now, Spohn had to face the dismal possibility that Sergeant Matheson's story might be a lie. And though they still had the van, another piece of vital evidence was lost forever.
We decided that this case was possibly more than a negligent homicide. And because of that, we decided we should probably have a forensic pathologist do an autopsy in this case. However, at that time, we found out that the body had been cremated.
Yvonne Matheson's body had been autopsied 3 days after her death. On the island of Hawaii, the coroner is also the chief of police. A pathologist from a nearby hospital is retained as a consultant. The pathologist was told that the death was accidental. But a pathologist specializes in natural causes of death, such as disease. Even so, he could tell that the victim's injuries didn't jibe with Ken Matheson's account. The pathologist noted injuries to the victim's head, arms, and hands that weren't consistent with being run over or tumbling out of the vehicle. But the interpretation of these injuries lay outside the scope of the consulting pathologist's training. It was really a job for a forensic pathologist. who specializes in death by unnatural causes. Still, puzzled by his findings, the pathologist was sure to photograph every aspect of the victim and to take tissue samples. Now that the victim had been cremated, they were all that was left. A tragic accident case was now turning ugly. Spohn knew there was enough cause to open a homicide investigation, but without a body, there might not be enough evidence to resolve it. The original pathologist's photos and the evidence from the van would have to be enough. He braced himself for the inevitable public outcry.
In some ways, it's kind of a no-win situation. If you investigate and find out that the police officer is innocent and you announce that, everybody says, well, it's swept under the rug because this is a police officer. And if you investigate the case and you find out that the officer is guilty and you charge him, everybody says you're only charging him because you're buckling under to public pressure and he's actually innocent.
Sure enough, 6 months into the investigation, widespread criticism forced Sergeant Ken Matheson's superiors to put him on desk duty while he remained a suspect. The press coverage brought to light an intriguing incident. A witness who read about the case in the papers told investigators that on the night of the accident, he stopped to help shortly after 9 p.m. As he pulled over, a man, possibly Ken Matheson, stepped from the back of the van and shined a flashlight in his eyes. He told the Samaritan that no one was injured and that the police had already been called. Then he sent him away. Investigators now suspected that perhaps the passerby interrupted the crime in progress. They just had to prove it.
Martin, one of the interesting things about...
In Hawaii, Deputy Attorney General Kurt Spohn faced the unhappy task of investigating Sergeant Ken Matheson for murder. To find out more about the blood spatter in the driver's area of Matheson's van, he asked a colleague to locate the best blood spatter expert in the country.
A couple of days later, he told me that it was someone by the name of Dr. Henry Lee, who was the head of the Connecticut State Forensics Laboratory.
Henry Lee, who is now Commissioner of the state's Department of Public Safety, uses the laws of physics to uphold the laws of justice. His expertise is reading clues written in blood.
That's called medium velocity.
He's not afraid to get his hands dirty in the process. Like any substance, blood is affected by gravity and momentum. Every kind of bloodshed leaves behind characteristic clues. Stabbing will create a dripping pattern. The relatively low velocity of the weapon doesn't propel blood too far from the source. A speeding bullet, on the other hand, creates a bloody mist. And a bludgeoning wound produces large spatters that can spray far. By examining the tiny tails behind each drop of blood, Lee can determine the position of the victim and the amount of force used to create the injury. From this, and from the size of the wound, he can determine the type of weapon used and deduce the circumstances of a person's death. Lee is perhaps most famous for his work on the O.J. Simpson trial. He's also helped identify victims in mass graves in Bosnia. As soon as Lee received the photos taken from the Matheson case, he pored over them and became suspicious. He felt he was definitely looking at a crime scene.
After I received the photograph, did the detailed examination, my initial reaction, something is wrong with this case. Some foul play took place inside the van.
From the photographs of the driver's side window, Lee could tell that the blood at the front of the van was spattered at medium velocity, suggesting blunt force trauma. It appeared the victim was struck multiple times. The bloodstains on the window also contradicted Matheson's assertion that his wife dived out of it.
At the time of incident, this window was up. Approximately 200 medium velocity blood spatter was noticed in this area alone.
Lee needed to see the van firsthand to trace the trajectory of the spatter. Strings were connected to each droplet to determine their common point of origin. It turned out to be the driver's seat area, about the height where a person's head would be. Lee's findings showed the damage was inflicted before she left the vehicle. The photos from the autopsy showed that the victim's head had sustained enough damage to kill her. Once Dr. Lee determined that a struggle had occurred in the van, investigators knew that Ken Matheson was lying. His motive for killing his wife was probably money.
If she died in an accident, he would be paid $595,000, and if she died in an automobile-related accident, he would be paid $675,000.
Sir, step out of the car. Put your hands up. Keep your hands where I can see them. Face down on the ground. Come on, over here in the ground. Face down. Move it. Face down.
Based on the evidence, Ken Matheson was arrested on his day off. Police pieced together the murder. While Yvonne was driving, Ken Matheson struck her with a blunt object. She probably stopped the vehicle, or he gained control and brought it to a stop. He continued beating her to the brink of death. Marks on her hands suggested she had tried to defend herself. In the dark, Matheson probably didn't realize he was leaving the blood spatters that would be his undoing. Once he was sure that his wife wouldn't survive, he carried her out of the van and ran over her. He carried her back into the van and waited for someone to stop and call for help.
We had, a gut feeling and a lot of suspicions. We didn't have any hard evidence. So Dr. Lee's blood spatter analysis is what gave us our first piece of really hard evidence.
In 1995, Ken Matheson was sentenced to life imprisonment for kidnapping and murder. He's not eligible for parole for 25 years. Sometimes a coroner's findings can only tell part of the story. When that happens, forensic criminalists like Dr. Lee give a voice to the victims who would otherwise be silenced forever.
Victim died. She cannot testify. Physical evidence speak for her.
Matheson's simple but gruesome crime was undone by some forensic details that he just didn't count on. But can the same forensic science that proves murder also be used to prove that no murder was committed? Experts in New York State hoped it could. The town of Munnsville in central New York is one of those quiet, picturesque places that blends unnoticed into the landscape as motorists rush past. In June 1990, it became an unlikely battleground for a most unlikely soldier. The trouble started in a shabby farmhouse outside of town. Delbert Ward, 59, awoke at dawn to milk his cows. He tried earlier to awaken his brother, William, but he didn't move. William hadn't been feeling well lately. Delbert thought it best to let him sleep. Delbert would take care of the chores without him today. The four Ward brothers were quiet and simple-minded. They'd spent their entire lives on the dairy farm. It was their universe, all they had and all they knew. Reclusive and childlike, the brothers even shared their bed, probably as they had done since boyhood. William, the oldest, was also the smartest and strongest. He ran the show. Delbert was his right-hand man. The other brothers, Roscoe and Lyman, occasionally pitched in to help out. But on this day, June 6th, Delbert was on his own. Even after he finished his chores, he couldn't wake brother William. Something was wrong. Delbert called his brothers. The men didn't know what to do. Because the Ward brothers had no phone, Delbert and Roscoe walked to a neighbor's house to call for help. Their fourth brother, Lyman, watched after William until it arrived. 20 minutes after Delbert placed the call, state troopers and the Madison County coroner appeared at the farm. William's body was examined. No signs of foul play were noted. It seemed that 64-year-old William died peacefully in his sleep. His body was transported to the medical examiner's office, while police interviewed the surviving brothers. In the following days, the brothers tried to get on with their work. It would be difficult without Brother Bill. Delbert's life would be much harder, and his troubles were just beginning. At William's autopsy, the assistant medical examiner took tissue samples and careful notes. No indicators of natural disease were noted in the report. However, something unusual demanded attention. Pinpoint-size hemorrhages in William's eyes, mouth, and windpipe. These tiny spots, called petechial hemorrhages, can have a number of causes. Often, it's the first tip-off to death by suffocation. The assistant medical examiner couldn't rule out death by unnatural means. On the death certificate, cause of death was listed as pending further study. The district attorney was contacted and told the case was bothersome. And here's where communication apparently began to break down. The message was passed along to the state police, and the suspicions about the petechial hemorrhages became garbled along the way. Now, the possibility of homicide became a certainty. Delbert was taken to the station for questioning. He was interviewed for 4 hours.
Isn't it true that you had something to do with him being sick?
His interrogation was not recorded.
I am answering his questions.
According to attorney Ralph Cognetti in Albany, New York, Delbert was confused by all the attention. He only wanted to return to the farm, so he was soon willing to say anything. He signed the confession.
Tell them what they want to hear and they'll let you go home. And that's in fact what they said to him. They certainly didn't let him go home after he confessed. But if you have an opportunity to read the confession, it really sounds like a Harvard dissertation. And you know, certainly inside that did not come from Delbert's lips.
Nevertheless, the confession, coupled with the autopsy results, were enough to arrest Delbert. Later, a grand jury handed up an indictment against him for second-degree murder. To the people of Munnsville, population 400, it was absurd to think that Delbert would or could have killed his brother. They believed the state had it all wrong. When his bail was set at $10,000, the whole town chipped in and raised the money in a matter of hours. The kindness of the neighbors and the plight of Delbert Ward earned an article in the New York Times. The groundswell of support for Delbert began to grow. A friend of the Wards brought Ralph Cognetti into the case. Based on his conversation with Delbert, Cognetti was convinced of his client's innocence. A review of the evidence suggested that the homicide charge was based more on Delbert's confession than on the physical evidence from the medical examiner's office. As Cognetti was putting his defense together, he received a fateful call. The man identified himself as Cyril Wecht. The name meant nothing to Cognetti.
Here was a gentleman who explained that he was a forensic pathologist from Pittsburgh, and that he had read the article, read the story about the boys, and was willing to review whatever evidence we had without any cost to us.
In other words, what you're telling me is...
Dr. Cyril Wecht's reputation spreads far beyond the walls of the coroner's office in Pittsburgh, where he works as the chief forensic pathologist for Allegheny County. He's helped investigators on the assassination of Robert Kennedy and has consulted in the death of Elvis Presley. Besides degrees in medicine, Wecht also holds a degree in law. He'd read about the Delbert Ward case in the New York Times, and it piqued his interest. He requested William Ward's case file.
After I reviewed the case file, which included the autopsy report, my initial impression was that there was an inadequate basis for any forensic pathologist to conclude that this was an asphyxiation death from suffocation, smothering. There simply were not adequate findings for such a diagnosis.
Using the assistant medical examiner's original notes, Wecht formulated a more mundane diagnosis. William Ward died of heart disease, the #1 killer of men his age in America. The Ward brothers had in fact told authorities that William had been in poor health for years, but he refused to see a physician. His symptoms were consistent with cardiovascular disease, supporting Wecht's theory. But the prosecution believed that William's illness may have provided a motive for his murder. Did Delbert Ward kill his brother William? The state of New York said he did. According to their theory, Delbert suffocated his brother to release him from his failing health. They said that it may have been a mercy killing, but it was murder nonetheless. The prosecution pointed to Delbert's odd behavior on the day of William's death. When Delbert couldn't rouse his brother at the crack of dawn like he normally did, he went about his chores anyhow. To the prosecution, that lack of concern suggested guilt. To Ralph Cognetti, it said more about the realities of life on a farm.
It was a point that the prosecutor jumped on. How could a person who was so concerned about his brother's well-being go and milk cows? What came out at trial, and what I'm sure the jurors knew because we had 1 or 2 dairy farmers on the jury, was that if you don't milk a cow when it needs to be milked, then that cow's going to get very ill.
Cognetti and Cyril Wecht stuck with the idea that William died of natural causes, but they had to prove it. The victim had already been buried. all Wecht had to work from were the autopsy records, those same records and tissue samples that the state claimed showed nothing unusual besides the petechial hemorrhages. That's not how Wecht read them. He was confident that he had everything he needed to prove Ward's innocence. According to the thin tissue samples gathered at William Ward's autopsy, along with the medical examiner's data, William's heart was enlarged and his coronary arteries suffered a blockage of 20%. His right lung was heavily scarred and weighed twice as much as his left. His liver and spleen also were enlarged. Without a drastic change in habits, death by heart disease seemed inevitable for William. But Wecht had to undermine the prosecution's assertion that he was murdered to be relieved of his suffering. Though Wecht had only photographs and tissue samples of William Ward to work from, he called upon his vast experience on other cases where he had examined the bodies directly. He noted the petechiae, the telltale red hemorrhages found in the victim's eyes and mouth. To the state, these were clear signs of strangling. They eclipsed all other symptoms. While it's true that petechial hemorrhages can indicate smothering, they're not enough to prove it beyond a doubt. Unless a person is somehow incapacitated before he's smothered, the body will likely show signs of a struggle. William Ward's did not.
No injuries around the mouth, in the mouth, and the tongue, the gums. No injuries on or around the neck. No evidence of increased fluidity of the blood. No evidence of increased blueness of the blood. No aspiration of gastric contents that will occur as a person struggles. So we had none of it.
For the defense, there was no evidence of murder. William simply died in his sleep of heart disease. The homicide charge was the result of an unfortunate series of miscommunications that had grown out of control.
Or you can take the incident seen by one person and then passed on to a second and to a third. And then when you get down to the 6th or the 10th or the 15th, you'll find that that story bears very little relationship to the original creation, to the original version.
Coming into the case as an outsider, Wecht was immune to the preconceptions that Delbert Ward was a murderer. By looking at the case with a fresh perspective, he won Delbert's freedom. On April 5th, 1991, Delbert Ward was acquitted of all charges.
It grew like a bomb almost. It started small, and then by the end of the trial, he became what he is today, really a legend, certainly in that part of the state.
Cyril Wecht believes that the situation that Delbert Ward found himself in was not unusual. He's seen many cases that were tainted by a medical examiner's wrong assumptions, an investigator's speedy conclusion, or a simple misunderstanding. Unfortunately, these errors tend to compound themselves.
We work closely and constantly with homicide detectives, with police, with district attorneys. We hear their versions. Consciously, subconsciously, those versions begin to take hold. And the mind then begins to work. And you build up then your own impressions, ultimately your own opinions and conclusions that fit in best with those.
No matter how mysterious or suspicious a death may appear, the truth can be resurrected in the lab. Every day, the forensic skills of the medical examiner, coroner, and crime scene expert prove that the most important witness to a death is the deceased.